Found out my sister got pregnant by my husband and our parents hid IT, so I divorced and cut off my toxic family. But years later they called and asked me to adopt my nephews because their mother was terminally ill. My name is Teresa, and up until 2 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. I'm 31, married to my husband Mark for 5 years, and we've been saving for our own place for the last 3. The apartment we rent isn't huge, but it's comfortable enough, and we've managed to put away a decent chunk of change in our joint account. Almost enough for a down payment on a small house in one of the suburbs. That was the dream anyway. I work as a manager at Jensen Corporation, one of those big companies with glass office buildings and too many meetings. The pay is decent and my team respects me. Mark works in IT for a local bank. Our schedules line up pretty well, and we've settled into a comfortable routine. Every Saturday, without fail, we head over to my parents' house for dinner. Mom always cooks too much food. Dad always tells the same stories about his days in the construction business. And my younger sister Amber is always there. Amber's 28, works at a boutique downtown, and has been single for as long as I can remember. At least, that's what I thought. I always believed Amber and I were close. We shared clothes growing up, told each other secrets, and even now as adults, I thought we didn't keep things from each other. She'd call Mark sometimes to help her with things around her apartment, fixing a leaky faucet, assembling furniture, that kind of stuff. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? She's my sister, and he's my husband. I trusted them both completely. That Saturday 2 months ago seemed like any other. Mom made her famous pot roast. Dad complained about the neighbors, and Amber was telling us about some difficult customer at the boutique. "Oh, by the way," Amber said as we were clearing the table, "I hate to ask, but my front door lock is acting up. Mark, do you think you could come by tomorrow and take a look at it?" Mark glanced at me. "We've been planning to go to this farmer's market I've been wanting to check out for weeks." "Sure, I can help," he said before I could remind him of our plans. "That's so great of you," Amber smiled, touching his arm lightly. "I really appreciate it." I swallowed my disappointment. "We were going to go to that farmer's market tomorrow," I reminded him. "Oh, I'm sorry," Amber said, though something about her tone didn't quite match her words. "I don't want to mess up your plans." "No, it's fine," I said. "Because that's what you do for family, right? The market will be there next weekend too." "You're the best, sis," Amber said, giving me a quick hug. The next morning, Mark left early to go help Amber. He texted me around noon saying the lock was more complicated than he thought and it might take a while. I spent the day cleaning the apartment and catching up on some work. He didn't get home until almost dinner time, claiming they'd had to go buy parts and then grab lunch since the repair took so long. I didn't think much of it at the time, that's how much I trusted them both. In the weeks that followed though, I started noticing changes in Mark. He was constantly on his phone, texting someone with a small smile on his face. When I'd walk into the room, he'd quickly put the phone down or switch apps. He started working late more often. Our conversations became shorter, more distracted. "Is everything okay?" I asked him one night as we were getting ready for bed. "You seem preoccupied lately." "Just work stuff," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We've got this big system migration coming up. It's stressing everyone out." The weeks passed, and the distance between us grew. We still went to my parents' house every Saturday, but even those dinners felt different. Amber and Mark seemed to share these little glances sometimes. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Once I caught my mom watching them with this strange expression on her face, not surprise or concern, but something else I couldn't quite place. As Christmas approached, I threw myself into preparations, hoping the holiday spirit would bridge whatever gap had formed in my marriage. Mark and I picked out gifts for everyone together, and I spent hours wrapping them perfectly. I even found this vintage watch for Mark that he'd been eyeing for months, hoping it would remind him of better times. Christmas Day arrived, crisp and bright with a dusting of snow. Mom and Dad's house was decked out in lights and garlands, and the smell of pine and cinnamon filled every room. Relatives I hadn't seen in months milled around with eggnog and wine, catching up and exchanging presents. Mark and I arrived together, but he drifted away from me almost immediately, helping my dad set up the new sound system he'd gotten. I found Amber in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a platter. "Merry Christmas," I said, handing her the small, perfectly wrapped package containing the silver bracelet I'd chosen for her. "Oh, thank you," she exclaimed, giving me a tight hug that felt somehow performative. "I have something for you too," but also a surprise for everyone later. She looked almost giddy, her eyes bright with excitement. What kind of surprise? I asked. You'll see, she said with a secretive smile. I think it's going to change everything. Everyone gathered around the dining table for Christmas dinner. My parents' home felt warm and festive, but something in the air made me uneasy. Amber kept glancing at Mark with this weird little smile, and he looked nervous, constantly adjusting his collar and avoiding my eyes. After Mom served her traditional ham and all the sides, we settled in to eat. The conversation flowed around me, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching a movie of someone else's family holiday. I'd like to make an announcement, Amber said suddenly, tapping her glass with a spoon. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. I have some exciting news to share with all of you today. She stood up, practically glowing, and placed a hand on her stomach. My first thought was so innocent, maybe she'd finally met someone? But then I noticed my parents weren't looking surprised at all. They were smiling, like they already knew what she was about to say. I'm pregnant, Amber announced. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Relatives rushed to hug her, asking questions about due dates and nursery colors. I sat frozen, my mind racing. Amber wasn't dating anyone that I knew of. How could she be pregnant? That's wonderful news, honey, my mother said. But there was something rehearsed about it. Who's the father? My cousin Jake asked the question everyone was thinking. Amber's eyes found mine across the room. Well, that's the second part of my announcement, she said, her voice softening. The father is Mark. The world stopped. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. My husband? The father of my sister's baby? I turned to look at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was all a sick joke. But he just sat there, staring at his plate. Mark, I finally managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up at me then, his face a mask of guilt. It just happened, Teresa. I didn't plan it, but I have to take responsibility. Just happened? I repeated, my voice rising. Things like this don't just happen, Mark. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching us like we were some kind of Christmas drama special. My parents didn't look shocked at all. They knew. They'd known all along. You're all in on this? I asked, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. My sister and husband are having a baby together, and you all knew about it? Teresa, please calm down, my mother said sharply. Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene, I laughed, a horrible sound that didn't feel like it came from me. My husband got my sister pregnant, and I'm not supposed to make a scene? You're overreacting, Amber said coolly. These things happen. We didn't plan it. These things happen? I repeated, incredulous. No, Amber. Sisters don't sleep with their sisters' husbands. That doesn't just happen. Don't talk to your sister that way, my father said sternly. She's going to be a mother. You should be happy for her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Happy for her? Are you serious right now? She's been sleeping with my husband. Teresa, my mother said in that tone she used when I was a child and had embarrassed her in public. Your sister is giving us a grandchild. This is a blessing. I looked from my mother to my father to Amber and finally to Mark. None of them seemed to understand the magnitude of their betrayal. It was like I'd stepped into some alternate universe where loyalty meant nothing. You're all traitors, I said, grabbing my coat and purse. Every single one of you. Don't be so dramatic, Amber called after me as I headed for the door. You're totally overreacting to this. I slammed the door behind me and sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. My phone showed it was only 3:30 p.m. on Christmas Day. The day that had destroyed my life. I drove back to our apartment, Mark's and mine, in a daze. Once there, I moved on autopilot, pulling out suitcases and throwing in my clothes, toiletries, everything I could think of that was mine. I didn't want to be there when Mark came home. I called my best friend Rachel, praying she'd answer on Christmas Day. Teresa, what's wrong? She asked, immediately picking up on the distress in my voice. Mark's been cheating on me with Amber, I sobbed. She's pregnant. Can I please stay with you for a few days? I can't be here when he gets back. Oh my God, Rachel gasped. Of course you can stay. Come over right now. I thanked her through tears. Relieved I had at least one person I could still trust. Rachel welcomed me with open arms and a much-needed glass of wine. I told her everything as we sat in her cozy living room, Christmas movies playing unwatched in the background. "You need a lawyer," she said after hearing the whole story. "I know someone who specializes in family law. I'll call her right after Christmas." "Thank you," I whispered, exhausted from crying. "I can't believe this is happening." "Just remember, none of this is your fault," Rachel said firmly. "They betrayed you, not the other way around." That night, as I lay in Rachel's guest bedroom staring at the ceiling, I wondered how my life had fallen apart so completely in a single day. The people I trusted most had been lying to my face for months. The future I'd planned was gone. The days after Christmas passed in a blur. I stayed in Rachel's guest room, barely eating, checking my phone constantly despite myself. Not a single call or text from Mark, my sister, or my parents. It was like I'd been erased from the family, all because I wouldn't smile and accept their betrayal. True to her word, Rachel connected me with her friend Diane, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer who agreed to meet me the day after New Year's. Her office was minimal and practical, just like her approach. "So your husband impregnated your sister," Diane said, reviewing my notes. "That certainly makes for a clear-cut case of infidelity. What do I do now?" I asked. "We file for divorce immediately," she said. "You mentioned a joint savings account for a house down payment?" I nodded. "We've been saving for 3 years, almost $75,000. Access that account today, and move half into a new account under just your name," she advised. "It's marital property, and you're entitled to half, but these situations can get messy fast." I did as she suggested, then had Diane draw up the divorce papers. I opted to have them delivered to our apartment by courier rather than facing Mark myself. I couldn't bear to see him, knowing he'd been sleeping with my sister while planning our future together. A week later, Diane called to say Mark had received the papers and agreed to the terms. No fight, no contest. Part of me was relieved, but another part felt even more betrayed, like our marriage had meant so little to him that he could discard it without a struggle. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. Each time I had to attend a meeting, Amber was there, holding Mark's hand, her pregnancy beginning to show. She'd smile at me with this infuriating smugness while Mark could barely meet my eyes. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset, maintaining a cold silence throughout. By early March, everything was finalized. Our joint savings was split equally, the lease on the apartment remained in Mark's name, and I was officially no longer Teresa Wilson but Teresa Cardenas again, back to my maiden name. Rachel insisted we go out to celebrate what she called my Independence Day. We went to a nice restaurant downtown, ordered expensive wine, and toasted to new beginnings. "To freedom," Rachel said, raising her glass. "To never making the same mistake twice," I replied. That night, feeling lighter than I had in months, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in this city, surrounded by memories and the constant risk of running into Mark, Amber, or my parents. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my boss at Jensen Corporation. "I need a fresh start," I told him. "Is there any possibility of transferring to another branch?" He seemed surprised but understanding. "As a matter of fact, our Seattle office has been looking for someone with your experience. Would that be too far? Seattle, nearly 1,000 miles away. Perfect." "Not at all," I said. "I'd be interested." Things moved quickly after that. The Seattle office interviewed me via video call, and within 2 weeks, I had an offer letter. The position came with a slight promotion and a salary increase. For the first time since Christmas, I felt hopeful. I was packing up my things at Rachel's when my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Teresa, it's Mom," she said when I picked up, her voice simultaneously stern and placating. "I've just heard from Caroline that you're moving away." Of course, news traveled fast through my parents' friend circle. "That's right," I replied coolly. "And you weren't going to tell us?" "We're your family, Teresa." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Are you? You didn't act like family when you sided with Amber and Mark after they betrayed me." "You're being childish," she scolded. "These things happen. Family means accepting each other through good times and bad." "No, Mom. Family means not sleeping with your sister's husband." She sighed dramatically. "Well, regardless of how you feel, you should know your sister is getting married in 2 months. She wants you to be her bridesmaid." This time I did laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. "You can't be serious." "Of course I'm serious, it would mean so much to her." You need to rise above this pettiness, Teresa. Be the bigger person. In that moment, I realized my mother would never see the situation from my perspective. In her mind, I was the one being unreasonable. I'm not coming to any wedding, I said firmly, and I don't want to hear from any of you again. Then I blocked her number, along with my dad's and Amber's. It felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb, painful but necessary for survival. A week later, I drove away from the city that had been my home for my entire life, my car packed with the few possessions I'd kept. Rachel had thrown me a small going-away party the night before, and her tearful hug was the only thing I truly regretted leaving behind. Seattle welcomed me with its famous rain and surprising warmth. My new apartment was small but mine alone, with a view of the Space Needle from one window. The office team took me to lunch on my first day, and I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time in months. I threw myself into work with a fervor that surprised even me. Without family dinners, a husband, or local friends yet, I had endless hours to dedicate to projects and learning the ropes of my new position. My boss noticed, and 6 months later I was promoted again. Occasionally, distant relatives would call with updates I never asked for. Amber had given birth to a boy. My parents were doting grandparents. Mark and Amber had rented a house not far from my parents. Each time, I would listen politely, then change the subject. Those people felt like characters in a story I'd read long ago, not real people who had once been the center of my world. I dated casually but kept everyone at arm's length. The betrayal had left me wary of letting anyone get too close. Instead, I focused on building my career and slowly creating a life I was proud of. 2 years after moving to Seattle, I'd saved enough for a down payment on my own condo, no joint account, no one to betray my trust, just my name on the mortgage. The day I got my keys, I stood in the empty living room and cried, not from sadness but from pride. I had rebuilt my life from nothing. 7 years after my divorce, life was better than I ever could have imagined. At 38, I'd been promoted to regional director of our Seattle branch, managed a team of 30 people, and had just finished renovating my condo exactly the way I wanted it. I had a small but loyal circle of friends, a healthy savings account, and the freedom to travel whenever I wanted. I hadn't spoken to my family in all those years. Through distant relatives and old hometown friends, I'd heard bits and pieces. Amber had a second child, another boy, a year after the first. Mark was working at some tech startup. My parents were heavily involved with their grandchildren. Then the call started. At first, I ignored the unknown number that kept appearing on my phone. After the fourth call in 2 days, curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Hello?" I said, cautiously. "Teresa? Is that you?" My mother's voice, older but unmistakable, came through the line. "Please don't hang up. We need to talk. It's about your sister." I almost ended the call right there, but something in her tone made me pause. "What about her?" "She's sick, Teresa. Very sick. Terminal." Her voice cracked. "The doctors say she doesn't have much time left." The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, Amber was still my sister, and the thought of her dying young shocked me. "What's wrong with her?" I asked. "Cancer," my mother replied vaguely. "It's advanced. Mark left her after the diagnosis. He couldn't handle it. The coward. Your father and I are taking care of the boys now." An uneasy feeling crept over me. "Why are you calling me now after all these years?" My mother hesitated. "We need your help, Teresa. Your father and I are getting older. We were hoping you might consider adopting your nephews." I was speechless. After 7 years of silence, this was why they reached out? "You want me to adopt my sister's children? The children she had with my ex-husband?" I finally managed to say. "I knew you'd react this way." My mother sighed. "You've always been so unforgiving, Teresa, so vindictive." Her words stung. "Despite everything, I'm not being vindictive, I'm being realistic. You can't possibly expect me to uproot my life to raise my sister's children with my ex-husband." "Well," my mother said after a pause, "if you won't adopt them, the least you could do is provide financial support. We're struggling, Teresa. Your sister's medical bills, the boys' needs. If you could send $1,500 each month, it would make a world of difference." And there it was, the real reason for the call. "I need to think about this," I said cautiously. "I'll call you back." I hung up and immediately called my Aunt Linda, my father's sister who had always been kind to me. Aunt Linda, is Amber really terminally ill? I asked without preamble. Teresa, oh, it's so good to hear your voice, she said warmly. About Amber, well, she and Mark did divorce, and she hasn't been seen much lately. Your mother's been telling everyone Amber is very ill, but I haven't seen her myself. That wasn't exactly confirmation. I thanked her and made a call I never thought I'd make again, to Mark. He answered on the second ring. Teresa, is that really you? It's me. I confirmed. I need to ask you something important. Is Amber terminally ill? Terminally ill? He sounded genuinely confused. No, not that I know of. We divorced because she refused to get a job, was spending all our money, and started drinking heavily. Her health problem is alcoholism, not cancer. I closed my eyes, anger and relief mixing strangely in my chest. My mother just called, saying Amber was dying, that you left her because of her diagnosis, and that they need money for her medical bills and the boys. Mark was silent for a moment. That's completely false. Your parents are helping her financially because she won't work, but there's no terminal illness. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said, preparing to hang up. Teresa, wait, Mark said quickly. I've thought about you so often. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe we could try again, now that no, I cut him off, laughing despite myself. That will never happen, Mark. Goodbye. I sat with this new information, my suspicions confirmed. My family was trying to manipulate me for money, using a fake terminal illness as leverage. It was time to confront them face to face. I took a day off work, booked a flight, and rented a car at the airport. I rang the doorbell, heart pounding. My mother opened the door, her eyes widening in shock. Teresa? She gasped, then yelled over her shoulder, John, Teresa's here. The warning was obvious. Hello, Mom, I said calmly, stepping inside uninvited. Where's Amber? She's upstairs, resting. She has good days and bad days, my mother stammered. I headed for the stairs, ignoring my father's awkward greeting. Amber's old bedroom door was closed. I knocked once and entered. The room reeked of alcohol. Amber lay on the bed, looking pale but certainly not at death's door. When she saw me, she quickly pulled the blankets up and put on a weak voice. Teresa, you came. I'm so glad you're going to help us. I stared at her, this sister I'd once loved, now a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way possible and was still trying to use me. I turned and walked downstairs, where two little boys were playing with Legos. My nephews, I realized with a start. They had Mark's eyes. I've decided to adopt the boys, I announced loudly. My mother and father exchanged alarmed glances. Well, that's very generous, my father began. But maybe it would be better if you just sent us money instead? No. I've decided that I'll start adopting them tomorrow. We need to act quickly. Teresa, let's not rush the adoption, Mom said quickly. Before I could respond, Amber came flying down the stairs, all pretense of illness gone. You are not taking my children, she shouted, face flushed with anger and alcohol. I laughed, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent house. And there's our terminal patient, making a miraculous recovery. I turned to face my family, these people who had once been my whole world. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Lying about a terminal illness to extract money from me? That's low, even for you. You're rich now, my mother said defensively. You could easily help us. Family helps family. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't betray family. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and try to use children as pawns. You made your choices 7 years ago, and I made mine. I'm sticking with mine. I looked at my nephews once more, feeling a twist of sadness for these innocent children caught in this toxic environment, then walked out the door. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with texts from both my mother and Amber, but I deleted them without reading. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some people don't deserve second chances.